today's lesson in rusty Porsche repair, right? Uh, so right behind me here, right there, you can see where I got in there and repaired that rusted corner. Let's take a close look at that. Just a strip. It was, and the main reason I did it was because it gets a jack plate underneath here. I didn't do a whole lot with these flanges, just left them kind of, to bend the metal. I had to cut it, right, and then bend it. So anyway, that kind of leaves me the latitude to do whatever I want with this stuff. So the next thing I'm going to do is address this corner here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the lower firewall comes across here, and that's where the spot welds are for the side of the lower inner firewall. But, I'm missing a lot of material there. But I do have this part that came with the car. Now, this is a complete inner longitudinal, but note that it basically stops, inch and a half beyond that opening, which would pretty much made up with the work I've already done. However, I'd have to get it over that tube, which would have meant cutting all this out, which I don't really want to do. So I think the way to approach this is I'm going to get in here and wire brush this and see how badly corroded it is. It looks really bad right now, but I suspect that metal's pretty thick. Up on top here, we got some pretty bad corrosion, again, which will be covered with the firewall. Also, you have this seatbelt anchor to deal with. So let's look at this part. So if we roll this over and look at the back side, that anchor comes almost up to that opening. So you don't really want to, if you can avoid it, cutting through that. I think the way to go, so it's a brand new anchor. Those are notorious for rusting from the inside. It may be a case where I come just beyond the anchor, make a right angle cut up to here. If I can find good metal on the car, go about halfway up the longitudinal side, and the same over here. And then just bring it in, right? So if that's the case, it would be somewhere in here. Now that's interesting. I don't see that little inset on that replacement part from Restoration Design. I think what that is a bracket on the inside that holds the heater hose. So that could be a little bit problematic cutting through. Also, when I cut, I'm going to have to be mindful that that hose is pretty shallow right there. So let me get in there with a wire brush. Let me evaluate all this here. I definitely want to come across here if at all possible. And if I can get that to made up, that means I'm going to have to trim some under here. That's no big deal. And it should go all the way back to here, right? Somewhere about in there. And then I can just do a patch on the rest of that opening, which will be partially covered by the jack plate as well. So, all right, time to get busy with the wire brush. Okay, I think this will work fine. So by cutting around the edges of that recessed area, which again I think is a bracket that holds the heater tube, I can get the new part to mate up. And just going to have to get back in here and probably with a Dremel and cut that remnant out of there and clean all that up. The good news is I got a giant opening to get to everything. I almost should have waited on this one, but it's okay. I can work around it. I used a combination of a cutoff wheel on the grinder, Dremel with a little cutoff wheel, and then went along this under here with body saw. I had to use body saw in these small spots. Now I went ahead and just kind of trimmed those. I think they're rivets, but you can see it's a bracket there. So I may have to sneak inside of there with a Dremel and just cut that strap on that bracket. And then should be able to work that thing out of there. Okay, so I just need to trim this tab off of here. You can see this is where I did that outer longitudinal piece back in here, where I've already done some welding. Funny thing is, I started to cut that strap, and it turns out wasn't needed because it's basically a clip. So just give it a yank and it'll come right out. But yeah, there you can see the original seatbelt anchor. Looks like they put it in a little bit of an angle. Maybe a little bit too much beer at lunchtime in Stuttgart or wherever they made these cars. Let's take a look up in here. Now you see still lots of good metal. And yeah, there is a top bracket on the hard pipe. So if you were trying to fish that out, that would give you problems. Looks like it's welded in a couple spots on top. So anyway, now I'm just going to trim out this little tab here and then cut the new part to fit. Okay, so I'm about to mark up the patch made out of the inner longitudinal piece from Restoration Design. You can see I've got the anchor points aligned, but there is a difference in the opening for the heater tube. Quite a bit of difference. I don't know that that's a big problem. What it will do is effectively leave a gap right here, but that's going to be buried by the firewall anyway. Actually, if you look at the rivets, the firewall is going to go right over the top of it, of that gap. So not sure why that is the way it is, unless their anchor point is further back. So if I align that opening for the tube, that pushes their seatbelt attachment point back. Which isn't that big a deal because the seatbelt, you know, is adjustable. I'm almost thinking I want to make the cuts in accordance with the heater tube. It's going to add more material, so which I like. And you know, if it doesn't fit well, I can always trim it back. So I'm going to go ahead and mark it in accordance with the heater tube opening, and then we'll see how that fits. I'm really liking the way this is fitting. Probably have to do a little trimming with the body saw to get the final adjustments, but it's looking pretty darn good. I'm glad I went with the alternate cuts on the replacement piece. And I did kind of clean up the inside of the replacement piece and put weld through primer, and same thing with that heater tube on the inside. Just scruffed it up with some sandpaper and shot some primer on it. All right, yeah, I really like how this turned out. I was able to get some really decent welds in there, and everything's nice and tight. Put some rosette welds on the back side here, and yeah, it's really helping out. So I think the next thing I'll do will be a patch underneath here, which will basically just be a piece of sheet metal with a slight bend in it to wrap in there. I'll have to trim that back to good metal, and then probably do a lip to join it right along there, do a bend in it. So that won't be hard. And then once we get that done, I can move up top and start working on this corner, which will probably be a couple patches, but pretty simple stuff there too. No incredible fabrication or anything. And while I got the car down at a lower elevation, I'll start drilling out all the spot welds on the firewall. So yeah, it's a work in progress. Probably going to be a while. I got a lot of work coming up to make some money to pay for these parts. So thanks for watching, and check back in soon.